All right, so welcome everybody to Design Bites. My name is Dan Waters. I'm a designer, UX designer. I work at SAP. I've worked there for 10 years. And I've worked several other places as well as a designer. And so Design Bites is sort of my way of sharing some of the things I'm working on and doing in real life, and also learning from all of you as we go. So I want to mention today that while I'll be sharing slides and sharing content, this is very much meant to be an interactive session and something that you can all participate in. So I'm hoping that if you're comfortable putting on your video camera, that would be great. Of course, I understand if you're not, no problem. But the idea behind that is we're going to be talking through some slides, and then we'll be doing some interactive work together. And when we do, it's really nice if we can actually see each other. And as I get started and go through the talk, you're welcome to use the chat. You're also welcome to speak up and ask me directly if you have questions. This is sort of meant to be a running conversation, so I'm much happier when people are asking questions than when people are silent. So that's just a little bit of housekeeping from me, and so let's get started now. So the title of our session today is Inclusive Design. Good design is for everyone. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that aspect of inclusive design is going to be in just a minute. So let me just start by talking a little bit about, I grew up in Chicago, in the Chicagoland area, and as a kid, my family would often on weekends take off to a place for dinner called the White Fence Farm. And it was one of those places that was, I think they served fried chicken and apple pie and all those kinds of good things. And as a kid, the thing I remember most that I enjoyed was being able to sit out. They had these giant chairs that you could sit on, and as kids and as a family, we could all fit in one chair, and so that was pretty cool. And as kids, we really enjoyed and looked forward to having an opportunity to do that and to play in the chairs and to see how many folks we could pack in there. So some years went on, and the family grew up, and we found ourselves in different directions. And I found myself several years ago at Thanksgiving dinner at my sister's house, and being kind of a popular uncle, well, I found myself not at the adults table, but I found myself seated at the kids table, and it looked something like this. And while it's nice to be popular, the reality, of course, is when you're in this kind of an environment, why it looks something more like this, and it's a rather uncomfortable feeling. And place to have to be for an extended period of time. And this is just kind of for fun, but many of you maybe have seen or remember this movie Elf with Will Ferrell, and here he's not the right size for pretty much everything in the room, and so we find some of these experiences to be comfortable or uncomfortable, inclusive or exclusive. And that's a big part of our focus today. So I want to just talk a little bit about this idea of mismatches. And so this is this idea of when something isn't quite right in this interaction between the user and the system, we call it a mismatch. So for example, if I'm too large for the chair or the table I'm asked to sit at, I feel excluded, or I feel like something isn't quite right. It certainly isn't, certainly hasn't been made for me. And so I want to talk a little bit today about how designers are both part of the problem for that and also the solution. And I hope that I can inspire you to recognize that you are part of the solution and are needed to really make a difference in how products are made and designed in the future. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit today about inclusion and exclusion. What inclusive design is. What's the value of inclusive design? We'll talk through some general principles of inclusive design, and we're going to do an exercise where we actually try to simulate thinking about how we would begin to start a project with an inclusive mindset. So hopefully those are all things are interested in. I hope so, and hope you'll stick around for the rest of it. Okay, so we are Design Bites. This is a class that I've been teaching for about 2 years now. In the past, we met. We would meet actually in the HanaHaus at their location, and of course now that's not something that is possible. So we're meeting virtually, and we are so appreciative of the chance to do this, and it's something we do every month, so you're welcome to come back and join us again. I want to take a minute and introduce you to the director of HanaHaus programming. Her name is Luan Shui, and I wanted to just give her a moment to say hi to all of you and give us a little background about HanaHaus and what's happening there. So. Hi, Luan.
Hi, Dan. Thank you for that introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Luan, and I'm the community manager here at HanaHaus. Just a little bit of background. HanaHaus is a cafe/co-working space. We have 2 locations, one in downtown Palo Alto, and another in Newport Beach. And so what HanaHaus essentially is, it's a community gathering point. And we have hours from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekdays and 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekends on regular times previously before coronavirus started. But now that with our current situation, we decided to change all of our physical events to virtual events. And so we have virtual events on a weekly basis now, and you can check them all out at hanahaus.com/events. So Design Bites is a once a month program, but we have other programs that are also once a month with different subject topics. For example, Cafe Sci is science-based, and SAP Speaker Series is more about thought leadership. And we have Business Bites, which is our newest one, which is kind of like Design Bites, but it's more business-oriented. And so I will place the link in the chat if you'd like to check that out. And I would really appreciate everyone coming through, and thank you for just joining us today. And if you enjoyed this event in particular, then I would highly recommend you check out everything else. Yep, that's it.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Luan. So, so we'll just continue, and let me start with talking a little bit about SAP's design process. So as I mentioned, I'm a designer here at SAP. I work on a design team. Actually, my team's focus right now is research, and we're part of SAP Central UX organization, and we often talk a lot about SAP's design process because as an enterprise design company, it's really important that we follow a good process in order to ensure a quality products. And you can see from the example here that we go through 3 phases: discover, design, and deliver. And this really follows closely with the design thinking process. Someone's not muted, so maybe if you have a chance, you could quickly check that. Okay, thank you. And it follows closely the design thinking process. While it looks a little different from the version that Stanford University puts out, you'll see that this is optimized for software design. But we go through the same basic phases. We go through a phase of research and fact-finding, empathy for the users, ideation and prototyping. And then we because we're software, well, we implement and test and launch our software application out into the world. If we look at the design thinking process from Stanford, you'll see something close to that. But again, now this is a little more academic, but we go through the same phases. And the point of this is that whenever you're doing design work, it's important to remember the process that you're using and where you are in the process and why you're doing the steps you're doing. And I think you'll also see that inclusive design is something that fits very nicely with this and is really a mindset and methodology that you can use throughout the software development process. So I want to talk a little bit more today about what we call mismatches. And it's a real important concept, especially in light of when we think about inclusive design. So thinking about mismatches, basically we think about it as when a mismatch occurs, it makes some aspects of society or of an application or of a product accessible to some people, but not to everybody. And so when I think of a mismatch, the word that really comes to mind is the mismatch causes a barrier. And this barrier is what keeps us from being able to be with or to interact with the product or the people around us. And these barriers are often very much a byproduct of the status quo or how our world is designed today. And so when we think of mismatches, I actually like to call them the building blocks of exclusion. So I want to just go ahead now and bring you back. I'm going to actually stop sharing and come back to the main screen. And I have a little exercise we're going to try. I've got some images I'm going to place into the chat, and I'm going to ask you to identify what the image is and what the mismatch is. And you can feel free to comment or just speak out loud or put it in the chat, but I'll do one image at a time, and then we'll discuss each as we have a chance to take a look at it. So let me do that. Okay, so I stopped sharing, and let me now. I'm just going to go and okay. So let me go and get the image. 1 second. 1 second. Why isn't? I can't seem to get the image. 1 second. Okay, so first here's the instruction, and then Okay, well, I'm having trouble somehow getting the image, so let me just go back. I can show it, so let me share my screen again, and we can just talk about it. 1 second. Okay. All right, so hopefully you can see this. So this is the screen I wanted to show you. And so question to the group is what is the image, and what would you say is the mismatch that you see here? And anybody feel free to comment, or you can put your you can put it in the chat, or you can speak out. So I see one mismatch is I can't read the writing language. Okay, right. So the mismatch here is there's some photos, there's some products. I want to order the product, but the mismatch is it's in a language I don't understand. I think it's Russian, but I don't read Russian, and so the language is a barrier for me to really being able to interact with the rest of this screen or these products. All right, so let's try another one. All right, how about this image? So here we can see there's it's outdoors. It's a hiking trail. There's a person has some mobility issue or is seated in a wheelchair. So you see the steps are a barrier, and that's exactly what the comment is, and that's exactly right. Here. The person would like to use this trail and be outside, but because of the limitations or needs of the wheelchair and the wheels, it's not really possible to do that. So it makes interacting with this very difficult, and is definitely a mismatch. All right, here's another kind of a fun example. Here you see we've got NBA basketball player, and where's the mismatch here? So I see short guy versus tall guy. So I mean, this is something that's a little. So I threw this in because it's a little bit different than a direct a mismatch where something is completely unusable. But here you certainly know in a basketball court the team and the nets are optimized for taller people, right? And so you have a shorter person, and that shorter person has a very different experience than people that is more traditionally thought of as being a basketball player. I see a comment in the chat that says, I think that could be an advantage. I assume meaning the different height. And actually, in some cases it could be, or it could simply mean that you have different workarounds or different ways you interact with the system than perhaps was intended, or that you've had to come up with on your own in order to be effective. That certainly happens all the time to all of us, where we're interacting with systems in ways probably the designers of those systems never really intended. So I think that's kind of a fun example showing what some of those differences are. Okay, so I want to mention and bring up now kind of an interesting experiment. It's called the Cyberball study. And there was a researcher, his name was Kipling Williams, from Purdue University, and he actually went out to a park one day and met some people. I don't think he knew them, but they started playing Frisbee. And it was a nice day, and he was enjoying himself. And in the middle of playing Frisbee, the two of them stopped throwing the Frisbee to him and then began to only throw it to each other. And so this little animation sort of is meant to sort of recreate that. And you can see, if you imagine, here's Kipling, the researcher, or put yourself in his shoes. Here you are in the middle, and rather than being included, the people around you have stopped throwing the ball to you and are only playing catch with themselves. And so he actually designed a research study based on this experience. And one of the things he discovered was he actually hooked people up to imaging equipment, and he discovered that this act of being left out or rejection actually caused measurable and significant increases to areas in the brain that measured and respond and giving you feelings of anger and sadness. And this was actually replicated not only in this example, but with people fully understanding that they were working with the simulation, and that the people that were excluding them were not real. They still experienced these same emotions and feelings. And so it's being excluded is a real thing. It's a real experience. And it's something that we as designers and makers of products need to certainly be mindful of and aware of what happens and the feeling that occurs when something like this happens. And I want to talk now about how this relates to what we like to call the shut-in, shut-out model. And so if you see this circle, well, basically what's inside the circle is what's in, and everything else is what? Left out, right? And so when this occurs, the people or the process or what's happening inside the circle almost always wants to maintain the status quo. And we want to protect that, that relationship. So because it in some way influences power that we have, or resources, or friends. And so it is what we call a sort of a circle of exclusion. And it's something that is very hard to break sometimes. So let's just keep going here. So what is exclusion? If we wanted to think of a definition, anybody have a word or two or three that would be something that could finish this definition? I see one, being left out. Well, let's see. Do we think that's right? Yeah, exactly. So exclusion is the process of being left out. It's pretty straightforward, and we just looked at the Cyberball example, understanding that there's pain and some anguish associated with it. When we think about inclusion, however, it is at the same time and the inverse of exclusion. So it's essentially part of the definition is becoming or being part of a whole. So that's definitely part of what inclusion means. But inclusion means in our world a lot of additional things. So we think about it in education. We think about inclusion in the workplace, and we think about the practice of bringing people that have historically been excluded for many different reasons into the workplace or the educational environment or other places, government, sports, music, many other things, of course. But that's all part of inclusion. And here, for example, are some basic principles of inclusion which come from the education world. But you see some of them are ideas of working collaboratively, involving everyone, embracing diversity. And this is a big part of it, because here, in order to be inclusive, we need to have opportunities and to create opportunities where we can bring diverse backgrounds or people or skills that haven't been included before into the fold. So when we think of now applying design, hello, someone needs to be on mute. Okay, thanks. When we think about inclusive design, we're not talking about something that is, the primary definition for it is what we call it a human-centered approach that considers the widest range of human diversity possible. And it includes that, and of course it's talking about
what's up, Brandon?
Culture.
How are you? Good.
All of these different.
Sorry, I'm on a call that I forgot I had to be on. Sorry, that was my headphone.
Hello. Someone needs to mute themselves 1 second here. Let me see if I can find who's there. Okay, thank you. So inclusive design really is the way that we approach how we can include the widest number of people with respect to all of their differences into our product or our design. And so it's really a mindset and a methodology. We think about it as a different way of thinking and working. It's something where we like to, ideally it should be something that you start at the very beginning when you're designing a product or building a product. And it's a chance to learn from people's different perspectives. And it's actually a really good opportunity to look for ways to innovate, because we're now beginning to view our product challenges or the problem we're trying to solve from perhaps a different perspective than we had before, which is what really allows us to think about new solutions and to really be innovative. All right, so I talked a little bit about what inclusive design is and sort of the definition for it, but we want to talk now about some of these definitions. So inclusive design as we already said, it's something that draws on the full range of human diversity. There's also something called accessibility. And accessibility, we like to say, we think of it as an attribute, while inclusive design is a method. And when we think of, so when we say we're talking about accessibility, it's the ways that it's the ways that the product is brought to us so that everyone can experience it. The other side of this, and you've probably heard this phrase, universal design, and they're really sometimes they're used interchangeably with inclusive design. But in fact, universal design is a little different than inclusive design. So universal design is now, instead of thinking so much about solution, screens or form factors or software. Now we're thinking more of the design of an environment. And it's a way of it's the widest range of solutions. It's the widest range a single solution can meet a specific design challenge in a way that's accessible for the most people. And we're going to look at a few examples of that. So I have some more images, and sorry, I would I would want to bring back, and we could talk about this in person, but I can't seem to get that working. So I'll just go ahead and show you the images again. But what we want to do is I'm going to show you a series of images. And for each one, I'm going to ask the question and ask you to identify whether the image represents inclusive design or universal design. And we'll talk about why it does or it doesn't. All right, so let's try. All right, so here's one, and it's a series of stairs, right? So what do we think? What do we think about this series of steps, and what does it look like it's designed intentionally to do? So I see a couple folks are saying inclusive. I see a couple universals. I see one that this is beautiful. Yeah, it's a really elegant and beautiful design, right? Okay, so this, I have identified this as a universal design. And the reason we say that is that it's one solution, and it's intended for the widest range of people possible, right? So you can walk the stairs. There's a guardrail, so if you're blind, you could hold the guardrail and walk down the stairs. And it's also been designed and engineered for wheelchair access or bike access, right? So one design is fitting many possible use cases where it's needed. Okay, cool. So good responses, folks. Good ideas. All right. So how about this one? So this is one of those old bathtubs with the claw feet, and oh, I see someone. I see Sylvie says dangerous. Nice. Well, actually, here I'm kind of tricking you, and so this example isn't actually either inclusive or universal. It's actually an example of a very exclusive design, in the sense that it's really only designed for an adult person that can step in and out of it fairly easily, or maybe for a child if an adult is around to hold on to them or something. So it's actually a design that actually puts barriers up, doesn't it? It's really only useful for a certain subset of people that it was intentionally designed for. All right, here's another one. This is kind of a fun one. Oh, I see inclusive and cute. So that cool. I really like that. So yeah, absolutely, it's inclusive. And the reason behind it, anybody want to give maybe why they think there's a reason here why this would be inclusive as opposed to, say, universal? So I see, yeah, there's an answer that says two separate solutions. So here, in this case, the designer has specifically designed for several form factors. And I don't know what would happen when the child grows a little bit more, but for right now, it's a perfect solution for this example. And here, so this is representative of a good example of inclusive design because it understands there's different needs, and it provides solutions specifically tailored to meet those needs. All right. Okay, now how about this one? I spent some time in Home Depot this past weekend, so apparently all of my time was spent in the shower section and looking at different fixtures and fittings. So I have this on my brain, but so here, anyone can go inside it. And universal, so I see exclusive as there is a lip, and so that's a bit of a problem. But ideally, it's meant to indicate a universal design in the sense that anyone can pretty much access this. Even if you're in a wheelchair, you can go up to the edge of it and then get out and be able to move inside of it. So if we think about the bathtub with the claw feet example earlier, and now we look at this, we see, well, there's a much greater range of people that can use this walk-in bathroom example. Okay. And here is a set of Apple products. I see Apple Watch, an iPad, iPhone. What do we think this represents? I see universal, universal, universal. And actually this is meant to be an example of inclusive design. So here, in this case, Apple products, they don't have one product like the stairs that has so many different ways you can use it. But what they've done is they've created multiple form factors. And for each form factor, there's specific uses that make that form factor appealing to different user groups or user situations. So when we see this and the different form factors, we would think of this as an inclusive design. All right, cool. Well, thanks for playing along. I had fun with this. I hope you did too. So when we're thinking about these definitions, as I said, universal design, we like to think of it as one size fits all. We create one design and it is trying to solve the problem for as many use cases or people or needs as possible. And inclusive design is more this idea of one size fits one. So in inclusive design, we solve perhaps in one application or one product, we have multiple ways to do something that reflect the different ways our users need to access and use our products. Okay, so coming from the design world and the way I've been used to work, I sort of look at it and see similarities between responsive and adaptive web design or mobile applications. And when I see this, I think it follows very closely the same idea. So a responsive design is one that is one design that is generated and can work across multiple devices, but it is the same design, and we would call that a universal design, responsive. Whereas adaptive is I mean, by its very nature, it runs a browser detection script, and it understands what form factor it is, and it renders sometimes a unique UI for design specifically for that form factor. And so I think that's a closer match to the idea of inclusive design. Anyway, I thought that was a good way for me to remember it. Maybe that's something that also resonates with you. So why do I have to worry about inclusive design anyway? I mean, it's you know, is it that important for my daily work, or what's the point? And so I'm assuming all of you are here today because you're interested in the topic. You've probably heard something about it. Maybe you work with it. Maybe you're starting to. But what are a few reasons why inclusive design valuable and even perhaps necessary in the work we're doing today? That's the question I'm asking, and what I'm going to ask next is you just take a minute and try to come up with 3, 4, 5 reasons why inclusive design is something we need to be doing in today's world. I have a list of 8, but I don't expect you all to come up with that. I just want to sort of just give you a chance to think of well, why do we need inclusive design, and tell us what some of your reasonings might be for why we need it. And if you could put those in the chat, we'll just talk about that, and we'll explore some of these reasons. So tell me, what are some reasons why we need inclusive design, and why is it valuable? Okay, so I see something from Jen, because aging baby boomer population, right? So people are aging and have different abilities, perhaps than they did earlier in their life. Let's see, because it makes it easy for people with disabilities. Yes, absolutely. Here's another one. You can design inclusion or exclusion into the world. So legal requirements and litigation. Yeah, so that's another interesting reason. And in fact, that's already a big part of what's happened with accessibility, which is when we build accessible products, already that's a legal requirement. So if I'm releasing a software product, I have to include, by legal definition, ways for people who have impaired sight or vision or hearing, ways for them to access and use my software. Reduce the gaps in cultures and class. Yeah, right, that's a good one. Missing out on possible connections as a business. Yeah. Profitable. Okay, that's an interesting one. Right. Okay. So you guys have some really good ideas here. So I think you're definitely on the right track. So let me just show you. Let me just show you the reasons I came up with, and we'll talk through maybe a few you didn't mention and see what you think. So. Accessibility was one you mentioned, right? So that if we practice inclusive design, that means more people have access to our products. I think there's an ethical value that comes into play where as a corporate entity, we want to do good in the world, or as designers, we want to do good. And part of that would have something to do with making the software or the products we make available to everybody, right? There's something with situations. So a reason to practice inclusive design is something as simple as I'm working on a product on my desktop, but when I'm on the go or on the train, I have a different work experience, and I can only maybe access the product on my phone, and so I have different needs than I did at my desktop. We think about things like growing a larger customer base. So if you think about it, people with disabilities represent it's under 10% of the population of the user base, but when you think of it from a business perspective, that's a pretty large margin of people that if you can bring them into your product user base, you've greatly grown your customer engagement. There's definitely a legal thing going on here where if I don't worry about inclusive design today, in a few years, accessibility has already been legally mandated, what if now I find there's some legal requirements and now I have to go back and perhaps redesign all of my software. And lastly, I think one that's kind of a nice one is a good reason to practice inclusive design is for the opportunity to perhaps innovate and differentiate my product based on the fact that I've uncovered or discovered ways that I can help people use my product that couldn't use it before. So those are all some good reasons. We can also see another side of this is to avoid the consequences of poor decisions. And here you see there's an example of some algorithms that were used in a product, and it actually caused chaos in the UK because it was recognizing some students as being more desirable for certain universities than others. And of course, you know, that's going to always cause problems when everyone doesn't have the same ranking or opportunities as others. This is a kind of a famous example, and this is something that's currently, I mean, this is going on right now, where the facial recognition technology we use has a higher error rate when it tries to recognize people with darker skin colors or skin tones. And here, one of the reasons for this is that the training set that was used when the machine learning and the AI was put in place was not a data set that that actually was representative of the real world. And so why did this happen? And this is a good example of this idea of the in and the out, right? Where because people on the inside think this is the way we've always done it, so it's okay. And here's an example where in the end, this wasn't okay, and it really has caused and is causing some serious problems. So that's what we want to do is we want to use inclusive design as a method to break the circle of exclusion. And so when we see this idea of people on, you know, on the inside or the outside, we want to try to do something where we break this cycle. And so we often hear people say things like, well, I didn't make the rules. This is the way it is. So this is how we've always done it. And we continue to do things in a certain manner and design things in a certain manner. And so this is something that is both a problem structurally in a corporation, but it's also an issue in the design world, because if we're the ones creating the products, then we also need to be responsible for realizing that we can change the game. We don't have to necessarily do things the way they've always been done. So we like to think about this idea of ability bias. And so it's a tendency we have to solve problems based on our own abilities and using our own abilities as a baseline. So I remember when I was just starting my career as a designer, I worked for Motorola, and I worked on mobile phone products. And I probably still am an ideal, sort of an ideal user for our mobile products. And so everything we did and the design work we did, I carried sometimes 3-4 phones in my pocket, and if I could use the phone and if I could perform the task to my satisfaction, then I considered myself a pretty good baseline. And yet this is not, when we do that, what happens? Well, we're excluding people that have different abilities, and that's actually part of the problem, right? So what we need to actually be thinking about doing is thinking about how we can change that. And one way we do that is by thinking and using human ability as our design consideration. So instead of thinking and judging something from my ability, looking at how other people might need to use my product and what their abilities, how they are differently abled, and looking at that as a baseline for how I would begin to now design my product based on considering these differently abled people or differently abled situations. And this really brings up this idea of when we think about abilities, it's not so much in inclusive design. So when we think about accessibility, we're oftentimes almost exclusively thinking about how does this relate to certain conditions, right? But when we think about inclusive design, it's not so much that we're necessarily thinking specifically about disability as a health condition, but we like to think of it in terms of this idea of the disability equals mismatched human interactions. And when we think about that, it opens the door to lots of opportunities for us to think about new ways where we could create better matches and solve things in better ways for people. So there's 3 skills that I want to focus on when we think about what you need to do to be an inclusive designer. And so the first is the ability to identify these ability biases and understand mismatches. And to then be able to think about diverse ways that these differently abled people could actually participate. So for example, is there more than one way to save a file on your laptop? And when you think of different ways to do this, now suddenly, instead of having one way for everybody that actually limits people, maybe there's several different ways where you can actually make this transaction occur. And you've now expanded the user base and of people that can use your product. And you've included people that perhaps in the past could have made it work by doing some extensive workarounds. But you know what? Now you've just made a new friend when they realize that someone doesn't see them as invisible, but has actually designed something that improves their life or improves their abilities to use this product. Excuse me. So there's 7 principles I just want to quickly go through of inclusive design. So if you say, yes, I really want to, I'd like to start doing more with inclusive design, and maybe you see some value with this the mismatch idea, but maybe you've heard of the heuristics, the 10 heuristics from Nielsen Norman, or there's several other heuristics. Ben Schneiderman has put out a set of usability heuristics. But here we think about these principles for inclusive design. And it's a pretty good list. When we think about these principles, if you have a chance and you can look at your existing product and look at it from some of these principles, you probably will immediately see ways that you could help make your product better and more inclusive for more users and more differently abled people. So we'll go through quickly the list of these principles. So provide comparable experience. So here what we want to do is the interface should be comparable to all different people. So whether I'm culturally speak one language or another, I should, for example, be able to see and read and experience my application or my product in the same way or in a similar way. And I think that is something that it's pretty basic for any experience or user group. Consider the situation. So people using your interface find themselves in different situations, meaning in one circumstance, you have an ideal conditions for using your product, but perhaps in others, not so much. So how can we help them? Or because of a disability or an accident, perhaps some of their abilities have been limited or changed, and they now need a different experience. So one example of this is color contrast. So if you're outdoors and you're in the bright sunshine, it's harder to actually see the screen. So what can we do from color contrast to improve that experience? And that's actually an experience of a design situation that happened with us at SAP. This is a product that came out a few years ago. I didn't create it, but I worked with some colleagues that did. And this was a tennis app for coaches. And it actually was plotting and tracking things like serves, locations of the ball, and so forth. So the tennis coach would be using the app, and as you can imagine, in a stadium or in certain places, perhaps you're indoors or in the shade on one side of the court, and then you move to the other side, and suddenly now you're in bright sunlight. And unless we had the ability to change this mode and from low contrast to high contrast, in certain circumstances, the coaches would find the application unusable, which of course wasn't acceptable for us, because if a coach can't use the application throughout the game, then they really might as well not use it at all. So I think this is a good example of one way we were able to take a good design approach for the situation at hand. Consistency. So for example, helping people, if people understand that the page architecture is going to always be the same, then it's something that they can count on and rely on it. So for example, if I have problems with vision, I still can expect that at the top of the page will perhaps be my menu or my navigation. So again, it's helping people by applying conventions that most people would expect to see or work with in a certain way. Giving control. So make sure that people are in control. As a user, I should be able to see and interact with content in the way I want to. And this allows, if we give people this kind of user freedom, then this opens up a world of opportunities to people with different abilities to access and use the content in the way that's most comfortable for them. And we like to offer choice. So provide different ways for people to complete tasks, especially those that are complex. This is just common sense, but I think this is one of those things where too often we design for sort of a standardized user or use case, and we don't provide sufficient alternatives or sometimes even alternatives at all. Prioritize content. So here we really want to make sure that users can actually complete the core tasks or the main reason for them being on the page within prioritized contexts. So meaning I shouldn't have to scroll to the bottom of the page to actually do something, let's say. And so one example of this is this concept of progressive disclosure, where perhaps if it's complex, I only show you part of the content until you've decided this is what you want to look at or do, and then the rest of the content is revealed. Sort of like your email program, where you see a list of emails and a title or a description, and until you click or go into it, you don't see the rest of it. Adding value. So how do the value of features improve the experience for different users or differently abled users, right? So here, for example, features such as adding voice interface or TV connections. So people that struggle with different form factors, let's say your phone, they might be able to interact with a larger screen size much more easily. And so we need to be sure that we have a robust enough feature set that people of different abilities can work with and use your software or application within a manner that is possible for them. So that's kind of a quick walkthrough of a set of principles you can use anytime when you start working with and thinking about designing it from an inclusive manner. I have this example of this book, and it's called Mobile First. It's actually a book I purchased a number of years ago, but it sort of was a little bit revolutionary at the time, because we weren't necessarily thinking about designing applications from the perspective of a mobile user first. But when we did, we discovered that it helped us really understand and focus on the most important or the most primary use cases. And so similarly, from my perspective, this is where we begin to change now the process where we're designing and the design process we use through an idea of a similar mindset with inclusive design. So where at one point I would have started and said, well, I'm starting my design or I'm starting this project from a perspective of mobile first. Now maybe I need to be thinking and looking at my project from a perspective and a mindset of inclusive design. And now I'm thinking about, as I'm perhaps performing research or getting ready to start my design, I can start to think about, well, what are some aspects of my software or my product and the problems it's solving? In what ways does it perhaps include or exclude people that would ideally want to have better access to my product? And so that's a good place to start. And so I'm throwing up our design process again, because I just want to sort of emphasize that just because now I say I want to work with and design inclusively, I don't need to start from scratch. I simply can apply that as a mindset to my existing design process. But at each phase of the process, I need to spend some time looking at my design and thinking about what's happening from a point of view of inclusion. And when we do this, again, it will begin to help us begin to open up and see where we're perhaps shutting people out unintentionally. So how to get started, right? And I think this is the thing. I mean, it's good to get an understanding of inclusive design. What are some of the principles? But when we think about actually getting started, you know, how do we do it, right? So the place to start is by looking at and looking for points of exclusion. Where does the process the business process I have, or the consumer model, where does this action or interaction, where does it include and exclude people, and seek out these points of exclusion. When we do that, we'll suddenly discover that those points of exclusion become our brainstorm areas and the places where we can now think of new ideas. How might we begin to find new ways of including people where perhaps they were excluded? And so this will help us think through how we take those steps and begin to design new solutions. There's a way to do this, and it's an interesting kind of exercise. It's the ING exercise. And so we're going to try it in a minute, but I'm just going to sort of walk you through an example of how this works. Basically, you might say, I'm going to observe how humans are working with or using my product, or simply how are they working in a certain environment. Perhaps I don't have an existing product, perhaps I'm starting from scratch. We want to see how humans are engaged, working with, acting with, interacting with a given environment, work situation, or business process. So we want to basically observe people at work, in the warehouse, in the office space. What are they doing? I can remember going out on a research, we called it a drive along, and we went with a sales rep who actually used a cigarette lighter in his car to power a little printer where he would print out receipts for his customer. And I mean, we were just completely blown away that you know, he would do that. And he had some good reasons, but it's an example where the user was doing something completely different from what we expected. And we thought it was a completely automated process, when in fact, it was actually, by the way the user was doing it, a very manual one. So by observing different activities, we often find that they're different than what we might expect. So here we want to say, I want to ask, what is the ING? What is most important to this environment or situation? So for example, we said perhaps there's a work situation. Maybe it's in a warehouse. So what's the most important ING? And when we say ING, that's really, it's code for action, right? So an example might be running or walking or monitoring. Maybe the user or the person we're observing is picking items and putting them into a bin. So those are all the ING words. But the question always we come back to is this idea of how many ways can a human engage in this activity within the context of the environment. So for example, well, I'm not going to actually give you an example. I just want you to think about it. But how many ways can a human being engage in this activity? And it might be something like, when we say how many ways, well, if someone is walking through the warehouse, if the aisle is very narrow, maybe that is a limiter where the person can only walk in single file. So we want to think about different ways that you can perform these actions within this environment and work or play context. Okay, so without really explaining more, I'm going to actually, this is our last exercise for the day. And I just want you to try to use your imagination. Pretend you're at a playground or at the park, and identify the most important action, the ING activity that's happening there. So this, just use your imagination in your mind. So you're at the playground. Is it, maybe it's running or playing, climbing. If you're at the park, maybe it's hiking. Whatever it is, whatever you think is the most important action to you, write that down. And then write down how many ways how many ways human beings, and so here we're talking about, right, human beings. So think about some of the variants, right? A child or an older person, maybe perhaps someone that's disabled. How many ways could human beings engage with that particular activity in this environment? So imagine if you're climbing, what are some ways differently abled people could engage in that activity? And how would you provide equipment that supports that activity? So basically what I'm asking is write down the activity that you prioritized, and then write down or come up with how many ways you can think of that we could interact with this activity, and some examples of what you might provide that would allow people to do that. And we're just going to take a few minutes. This is nothing that you have to hand in or anything else. So just try to come up with a few ideas. We'll put them in the chat, and we'll just talk through a couple of your ideas. I'll show you an idea that we came up with, someone else came up with earlier as a follow-up, and we'll just talk through what it means and what this activity does, how it helps you begin to think about things in new ways. So give it a try. I'm just going to give you a couple minutes to think about it, and then when you have an idea, put it in the chat or speak up, and we'll continue. So go ahead. Just try to come up with this activity and different ways you would engage with this activity in the environment with people. I see one already. We have relaxing. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, so I like this relaxing example because, I mean, kids relax differently than perhaps parents. And then that becomes, an opportunity to think about, well, how might we provide different ways of helping people to relax in a park based on what they like to do, right? I see another idea, tactile surfaces on paths around the playground for visually impaired, right? So good. So this is an example where maybe there's a walking path or something similar, and how do we make that more useful to someone with some visual impairments? Good. See you naked with my eyes closed. See you naked with my eyes closed. In the playground, one of the ing could be swinging. So swings, that's an interesting idea. Yep. Oh, I see here, and you're also saying different grounds for kids who might have autism or other sensitivities. Good. So that's a group we didn't even discuss today, but certainly, so that's another group where people have different sensitivities. How might we make this experience better for them? Good, good, good. So I think you guys get the idea. I'm just gonna move along and show you the example that we came up with. And we actually, someone mentioned swings. That's exactly the experience I want to just sort of detail a little bit. But imagine if you go to a playground and you see a swing set and all of the swings are at the same height. Well, what does that do? That immediately means that you have to be a child between a probably certain range of age and weight. You need to have 2 arms and 2 legs. And the only people that are going to be able to use this design are people who match that. And the rest are really sort of left out. So, you know, when you think about that now in the context of a park, well, imagine if you're a family and you go to the park, well, there's maybe a swing set for the kids, but maybe, you know, parents or adults need a different kind of swing nearby, or maybe it's like a bench or a two-seater or something. But here you can begin to think about how could I provide on a playground different experiences for swings that engage people of all age ranges from a family, let's say. And you can see other ways that you might also consider the design is how could you adjust the size or shape of the seat? Perhaps by adjusting the size and shape, you could attract a wider range of users. And I really like this last little statement at the bottom, which says participation doesn't require a particular design, but a particular design can prohibit participation. And that's really one of the main points we're getting at when we think about inclusive design is we never want to roll out a design that prohibits participation, right? That would be a very poor result for us. So I just want to highlight a couple success stories where inclusive design has happened. Maybe it wasn't intended at the time because these are sort of historical examples, but they caused some innovation to occur, and the result was a very popular new design. So, for example, the drinking straw, where it has a flexible place in the middle of it, was invented. Someone was sitting with a child at a soda counter and watched the child spilling their soda, and so the flexible straw was invented. And even though straws are bad for the environment, I mean, you still see paper straws, but straws are used all around the world. The typewriter keyboard was initially created so that blind folks could write letters or write communications, but it was intended for people with visual disabilities. And text messages was another invention. Not really, well, it was an invention, but it was a technology that was used by telecom industries to help people that were hearing impaired to communicate. So all of these, so text messaging and typewriter keyboards started as an innovation to help people with different abilities, and they became mainstream products with extremely successful users and long histories of success. So you never know when you're designing and thinking about a new way to solve problems that help people use your product in new ways, what that could mean for your product. So I just want to leave you with a few resources. If you're interested in learning more about inclusive design, you can go to any of these resources. Microsoft has a really good website on inclusive design and a lot of work. I highly recommend that. And the Inclusive Design Research Center, you'll find a lot of good research and information there. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming today. I just want to say that we have a Facebook page. You're welcome to join us. If you've enjoyed the session today, come join us. All you have to do is, if you search for Design Bites, it's the first thing that will come up. And we put the slides up on our site. So there's some the links that we shared and some of the content we shared today is available there. So you're welcome to join us if you'd like. And this is me, so feel free to reach out, contact me if you like. And lastly, I wanted to just advertise, we're going to have another Design Bites next month, the last Friday of every month. And we actually have a special speaker next month, Professor Dan Rosenberg from San Jose State University, has written a book on a UX book on the magic of semantic interaction design. And it should be a really interesting time. He's going to walk through his methodology and how he uses it to create optimal user experiences. So it should be a really interesting session, and I invite you all to come out and attend. So thanks everyone. That's really all I had for today. If you have questions or you comments, you want to discuss something, we have a
yes, Dan, can you replay your information to call you? I was taking a screenshot and it changed. Could you replay that? Could you re-show it?
Sure.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed the podcast. I'm an interior designer and I'm working on senior engineer projects as well as asset management. And what you were telling me from beginning to end was so useful about different strategies and strategic pieces to design indoor and outdoor spaces for, especially when you have products that you can accommodate, technological products or solar panels, heating and cooling, nozzles geared to your design, the tools and concepts. So that was really good. I appreciate learning that from your perspective and hearing from you. And great, it just came up, UX design lead, SAP.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so
I'm going to be in touch with you. I'm Ariana, Lady Rain.
Okay, great.
All right, Dan, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so if you have questions, feel free to get in touch. And like I said, we meet every month, so I hope you'll come back. I had some problem today. I was trying to actually send the files to you in the chat. I don't know why it wasn't working, so I had hoped to make this a little more interactive and less slide-based, so hopefully I'll get that fixed next time. But thanks, everyone. Our time is up, but thanks. Your feedback is always welcome, so we appreciate that too. Hope you'll come back and join us for another Design Bites.
All right, email me. I'll be updated.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So take care.
You're very welcome. Okay, Jan.
Thanks, everyone.